Record. Well, it's good evening, Anna Xavier. Thanks for joining us. You're coming from the US this evening for you.
Yeah, it's kind of afternoon for me. Thank you for having me. Super excited. It's only 4 p.m.
Well, look, it's obviously the next day here in Australia, so I really appreciate you making some time for us to chat about your show. I'd love you to share what does the US audience need to know about your show, the podcast space?
Yeah, so the podcast space is a show that helps entrepreneurs, leaders leverage the podcast as the most powerful tool in their business. So basically, how to show up in a way that feels authentic, that feels good, but without working harder and getting overwhelmed.
And Anna, tell me, I was just sharing with you before we hit record. I mean, I stumbled across you in 2024 in the London podcast show. And I was really impressed with your work and your style. And I've been a listener. You're now at 90 plus episodes. You're up to
Yeah.
is it season three?
Season three. Yes,
Yeah, and
absolutely. We
you've
just
had a
launched it.
career. You've had a career in this space, so you know what you're talking about when you talk about, podcaster content strategies and data-driven decisions. What inspired you to create the show?
Well, it's funny because I always say that the cool thing about podcasting is that whether you're a beginner, you're mid-level or advanced expert, like basically you can really find your way into podcasting and share your journey and people will resonate with it. So I think that when this whole like thing happened is that I launched my company in 2020. And so I thought, I just started it. I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And launched the podcast space as an agency first, because, that like basically full approach where, we start with your content strategy and we edit to the podcast, launch it, all the things and promote it. And then I moved into like, okay, I actually want to do more like just the strategy and coaching and how I can be a consultant without having, because honestly, I couldn't care less about editing, I'll be honest. And for those two first years, I really was like, I want to just simply focus on creating, more like SEO content. So like assets for social media and articles. And then it got to a point where I was like, you know what? Because I don't have the client production anymore, I really want to have my own thought leadership. I want to break down what this show needs to be, because I feel like I have a very different approach, not simply because like the data driven, but it's more like, how can we leverage this in a way that feels good? Not like just like, what the air quotes, the gurus say. It's just like, how can you leverage something that feels already you're naturally good at? And there's a lot of in my brand that is about making the world a better place and impact driven leadership and servant leadership. And so I wanted to make sure that the podcasts that were out there were very much driven by like business or, like more on those sides that I was like, no, I want people to like learn themselves as hosts and tap into that natural hosting side. There's that skill set that they naturally provide, but just kind of like a challenge and connecting to people beyond just the, like the ROI. But then looking at the data, I could be like, all right, let's confirm if this makes sense or not. And just showing up in ways that it's like, okay, I know this, and this to be true. How can I explore becoming a host and making my brand stand out?
Yeah. And look, as a listener, I feel like you're my cheerleader when I listen. I feel like you're
Yes.
always wanting me to reach my full potential, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I want to be encouraging because I don't want people that listen to a show. One of the main baselines of the company was education. I want people, whether they can pay for my coaching or my consulting services or not, I want that resource to be out there because I've met incredible people that they just needed the information to get where they needed to be. And then like just boom happened, like incredible things happen. But like those first steps were fundamental in making sure that they would not give up or they wouldn't like
Yeah.
basically pod fade just simply because they didn't know what to do next. So to me, I want to be that cheerleader that maybe you don't have in your life because from experience, I know that podcasters or people who start a podcast sometimes like they don't say like I'm a podcaster, but like I have a podcast. they are the leaders in their group. They may be the only people in their group of friends that has a podcast or their peers. At work, nobody may have it. So I want to be that person who you feel like I'm cheering you on. And I'm not saying like at the end of the episode, but work with me because, gatekeeping,
Yeah.
because that's the only way you're going to grow. Like I truly believe that, reciprocity is something that does happen. You may share it with a friend. So it's kind of like I'm playing the long game and I want podcasting as an industry to grow and become a better industry. So that's my first step that I want people to
Yeah.
take is listen to the
Ah,
show.
that so comes across, Anna. Tell us about how do we connect with you? If we're curious, like I know you were sharing, you've worked with clients in Australia, so you're global. How do we connect with you? You have a fabulous YouTube channel, you're on all the services, Instagram, but you tell us, how do we connect with you in the show?
Yeah, so I want everyone who is either a woman, multilingual, or just someone who is impact driven to really come and listen to the show on any podcast platform, YouTube. But also, I work with podcasters, whether like that's course or guides or the one-on-one work at thepodcastspace.com. And I'm gonna say, come and hang out on Instagram because IG is the place to be. That's where I always share the behind the scenes, the more
Yeah.
like personal approach to how I run my business, how I am a podcaster, how I do, yeah, how's that intersection of business marketing and visibility. So if you want to have like, if you're kind of curious or you're nosy, come and hang out there.
Awesome. Well, I'll put all that in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us. It has been a delight to hear about your show. Have a wonderful afternoon, Anna.
Thank you. Thank you for having
Cheers.
me.